with the Electricity Club. How did that come about?
I've always been a fan of electronic music, you know, and I'd been blogging with another site, and actually, I remember I actually was doing stuff as a student, which was a long time ago now. Just, you know, contributing to the student newspaper, the odd review, whether it's a live gig or a album review. It's just something I've always been interested in. Then there gets a point where, you know, it's you're sharing knowledge, but you share, you know, you're pointing. I feel you're sort of. Someone once described me as the kid that has lots of records and he brings them around your house. Who goes, here, do you fancy trying this one? If you like Gary Numan, you might like this, and if you like OMD, you might like that. And I guess it's a bit like that. Obviously, I talk about stuff I'm not into because I think it's as important. I mean, I'm sure when you were younger, although you liked it if people liked Numan, when people didn't like some artists, it might have actually helped you along the way. Oh, they don't like, you know, I'm trying to think, modern romance. So you probably think, yeah, they've got taste.
Yeah, my problem was that when I was young, as I often say, I was Numanized. If it wasn't all Simps, I didn't want to hear it. But as I've grown older, I revisited a lot of songs which I didn't like, which I do like now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, with the Electricity Club, it is a synth or electronic music based site. So there is a bit of that division in there. There is, you know, we are drawing lines, we are niching. You know, behind closed doors, I mean, you know what I'm into, you know, some of the stuff I'm into behind closed doors, as it were, because it's the same as what your wife and daughter like.
Well,
I like we like a bit of, you know, Taylor Swift, and it was actually, you know, I don't know if we can say this, but I remember it was you that first mentioned Dua Lipa to me. And
yes,
and whether we, you know, people like it or not, that Physical is a blooming good electronic pop single.
Yeah, she's done.
Now everyone's switching off now. Can you hear them? They're all going, right, we're not having any of this. And you know, and if you look at it from a Numan point of view, I know that there's a lot of younger music fans who got into Gary because of the Sugar Babes. That's a fact. People, you know, there are people who have told me that that's how it happened. And I think there's a lot of dance people that probably got into Gary through Basement Jaxx.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of the more grungy types probably got into Gary through Foo Fighters.
Yeah, and I suppose it's a shame if they go to his gig to see him come running out with a guitar headbanging.
You know, I remember there was a period of all of that, but I mean, I guess that's all part of the conversation, isn't it? Because I mean, I remember the reason we connected up and why we're doing this is because I heard about your book backstage, and I was curious about it. I wanted to feature it, and that's why I got in touch with you, because you specifically, and again, it's drawing those lines. And I think there's a thing in Friends where Monica is sort of getting really het up at a party about rules, and she says, "Rules, we need rules. Rules can help control the fun." And it actually, to a point, I think it does, because it gets people into focusing on certain things. And what I found fascinating about your book was you were concentrating on what I call that Imperial Numan period.
Yeah.
You know, the 79 to 81 period, which, you know, for many of us, we still love. And I think you had the nerve to actually do that. Do you know what I mean? Because you know, to actually focus on a period which I suppose Gary sort of tends to, I wouldn't say dismiss, but he tries to avoid talking about when if he can.
Yeah, indeed. But the good thing about that, when I was doing it, I was waiting for people to sort of say something bad, but no one did. Everything was great. You know, Numan was on fire. All his own ideas. I was waiting for people to say, "Well, that was my idea. He nicked it and all that." But no, everyone was really positive. Whoever I spoke to. So
yeah. And since then, I mean, since all of that, you know, I've actually interviewed Gary twice, you know, live. You know, we'd actually done an email interview before I'd actually met you.
Yeah.
So that's 3 times officially, I guess, but 2 times actually live. So, you know, Gary, you know, I wouldn't, there are 2 people that are important to the Electricity Club that if they hadn't been around, I wouldn't have got into electronic music. One's Gary and the other one's Jean-Michel Jarre. So when those 2 got together, you know, to do Here With Me, I just thought that was just amazing. The 2 of them photographed together and getting on. I mean, Gary actually, in my second interview with him, Gary actually said to me he thought Jean-Michel Jarre was like the nicest bloke he's ever met.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and even there was one funny moment. Gary goes to me, "Have you met Jean-Michel Jarre?" I thought, no. You know, he asked me as though I would have done, but yeah, that was an amusing little moment.
Because like when our friends Electric came on Top of the Pops, because I was a Bowie fan and a Jarre fan, to me that was a combination of the 2 in everything I wanted as a pop star. I mean, how did you with the Top of the Pops thing?
Well, I was starting to get more into music at that point. So there was the new wave thing. It weren't punk. I was too young for punk, and I gotta be honest, I thought it was all a bit sort of horrible and aggressive, you know.
It had its moments.
But at school, at primary school, we had a teacher that had introduced us to. This will sound really weird now, and I don't think it would be allowed now. So it'd be the equivalent of year 5 in school. So 3rd form in our money.
Yeah.
And our teacher played us Kraftwerk Autobahn, the album, Pink Floyd Medal, and the Clockwork Orange soundtrack.
Right.
You know, you just wouldn't allow that to happen in a junior school now, but that's exactly what happened. I was, you know, but I didn't know what it was. I just remember thinking, oh, that's interesting. And then, if you remember, we came out of we went into a phase in '77 where we had I Feel Love, Oxygen, and Space Magic Fly.
Yeah.
And then '78 would have had Cerrone, Supernature, although I knew it because of the Kenny Everett television show.
Magic Fly was a disco song, wasn't
it? It was. I mean, that's how it would have been classified at the time. But actually, you step back now. It's a synth pop song with a dance beat.
Yeah.
But I guess, you know, being a teenager, so people, you know, started listening to things like Blondie and the Police and what was called, you know, two-tone.
Yeah.
And I started enjoying that with my mates, and, you know, that was what was on the radio and stuff like that. But I remember, you know, so because of that, you'd watch Top of the Pops, and I remember. He was first on, I seem to remember, or second on, something like that.
Something like that. I can't remember that, but yeah.
And I just remember thinking, this is weird.
Yeah.
He's standing there and not moving, and he looks really pale.
Yeah.
And he's not really singing, he's speaking, and this music's fantastic.
Well,
and I don't know if it was because I'd already experienced it in junior school. Or whether it was just something that, you know, it was almost like it was made for me, and I just sort of thought, oh, that's brilliant. I didn't clock the name of the song or the artist or anything. I just remember the next day walking from the bus to school, and I bumped into a mate, and we just looked at each other, and I said, "Did you see that bloke that was on Top of the Pops with a really pale face that sounded like a robot?" And my mate said, "Yeah, it was brilliant, wasn't it?" And that's literally how it started. So I mean, I would have been 13.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't. So the enormity of like that it was 6 minutes long and what it was about or anything like that, it didn't occur to me. It was just that this was a thing I liked. But you see, in those days, you see, I mean, you know, my mum would have had a tape record. It's one of those, you know, carry things.
Yeah.
And we never really had a culture of buying records in our house, or we bought albums, but they were all my mum's sort of Andy Williams and Engelbert Humperdinck albums and all that sort of stuff.
Four Tops, things.
That kind of thing. But no, I you know, you just listen to the radio. In those days, it came on and it got played. But I think it didn't really occur to me until so I didn't think about albums or anything like that. And of course, the next thing that then comes out, because there wasn't actually a follow-up Tube by Army single from Replicas. It ended up, he went straight into Cars.
Yeah.
And that was the moment when I just sort of thought, the guy's here to stay.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember actually, I thought the name was funny, Gary Numan, because I mean, I knew his name was Gary Numan, but do you know who I thought of when they said his name was Gary Numan? Petrocelli.
Yeah.
Do you remember that TV show, Petrocelli, the lawyer?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if you remember the actor's name.
No.
The actor's name was Barry Newman.
Right.
And all I could think of at the time was, "God, that's the bloke from Petrocelli." But at the end of the day, you know, when you think about, I'm liking all these pop songs like your Two Tones, your Blondie, and your Police. So with Cars, Gary's doing a pop song, isn't he?
Yeah, yeah.
But not only that, he's doing a reverse Bowie sound and vision in that it starts off vocal and then ends all instrumental. You know, sound and vision's all instrumental first and then goes vocal. This is the other way round.
Yeah, indeed.
And I thought it was brilliant because of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, it was the perfect follow-up single.
Yeah.
I mean, it was absolutely brilliant. I mean, I remember the first time I heard it or saw it was on, I think it was on telly or something. They used to do Radio 1 on the beach or something, you know, during the summer. Yeah, it came up.
The first time I heard Cars was actually quite weird. It was on the revived Jukebox Jury on BBC One. And I remember it had a mixed reaction from the jury. I can't even remember who was on the jury, but then they actually had members of, not the audience, but the public making their comments. And I remember one bloke sort of goes, "Yeah, with all that equipment he's got, he should learn to do something else with it," you know. And you know, I just thought, oh, this is great. So, you know, you watch it go to number one, and I hadn't, and it was at that point I was sort of thinking, oh, I might buy this record.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and then, you know, you get given money for your birthday, you know, in fact, so my birthday's in December. I got given money. And I remember I was waiting, you know, it was a risk, you know, buy an album for one blooming song. So you're actually sort of waiting to hear what else is going to get done. And I remember when Complex got released, I remember the first time I heard Complex, I was disappointed because I thought it was a bit slow. And it was on Top of the Pops when they had the strike on. Yeah. I don't know if you remember, there was this
wasn't that Weird Glass?
No, there was a strike on for Complex because what happened was they couldn't show any studio stuff, so the entire show was video. But even the DJs, they weren't on, so they had to so with this weird Top of the Pops logo, and the DJs would be speaking through it. But they showed Complex and they showed the video.
Oh, right, okay.
Which at the time I thought was really boring, but when you look back at it, it's actually quite advanced.
Yeah.
Time. But I remember thinking it was boring, but then I really got into it. But the one that stole it for me, the one where I thought, I'm going to buy this album, was when I heard Metal on Annie Nightingale.
Yeah.
And that's when I thought, right, got to get this. And then I think it was quite exciting. You buy the album and wow, there's a lyric sheet. You get the words. and actually another important one was at the back, you had Gary, but you had Sed and Paul and Chris.
Yeah.
And I felt that was quite an important thing because that was like a gang. Even though it's Gary, it's Gary's gang.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important that you feel part of a gang.
Yeah, indeed.
At that point, and it's really, that's why it's quite funny for me now to be friends with Chris, because he was actually on my wall, because I actually found a way of putting up my Pleasure Principle in a sleeve without actually damaging it. I can't remember how I did it, but so he was actually on. I've joked to him about that a few times, but that you know, so you bought into a lifestyle almost.
You did.
If that makes any sense. So that was my first one, and then I backtracked, and then I went and got Replicas. I think the year after. So I wasn't, you know what I mean. I'm 55 now, and yet I was in a way too young to be wholly getting into the Gary Numan experience that I know other people did, you know, which was going on the tour, you know, going on the touring principle and all that.
I mean, with Telecon, when he got the free single and they had Bombers live. No, sorry, it was on the B-side Complex.
Yeah.
On the 12-inch. When I actually went out and bought the single of Bombers, the original version, it was like, I really don't like this.
Yeah.
You know, it's nothing like the live version. But I mean, if you look at Replica's Pleasure Principle Telecom, which one is the best?
Ooh, that's a really good question, actually. I'm actually going to say the Pleasure Principle because I feel it's the most complete. It's my first one, so I've got nostalgic reasons for it. But if we actually then analyze it, Replicas is pretty good, but it ends really weirdly. And I think that spoils it as a record. Even Gary talks about it in his Praying to the Aliens book, that he actually thinks he might have made a mistake to end it with 2 instrumentals. And as much as I like the Peel session version of I Nearly Married a Human, I think he overdid it on the album with the album version, because it's very, the other versions all have the drum machine crashing through and it's sort of a bit ambient. And I think if you're 13, 14 years old, I don't think that's going to be quite your thing. I remember thinking, and when the machines rock, yeah, it's a nice little blippy sort of instrumental, but it actually is quite throwaway now. It's not rubbish, but it's the sort of thing you used to stick on a B-side.
Yeah, I mean, machines rock, take it or leave it, but I do think I Nearly Married a Human was a good track to finish with.
Yeah,
and I prefer the finished version than any demo versions or anything else I've heard, like you say, the Peel sections and that, just because it's finished. It's got that really nice sounds going on.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, because I as you know, I love raw synths and everything. But I do think it was a good one to finish with, and I prefer the album version out of all the ones I've heard.
I mean, the Pleasure Principle's got a real sci-fi snarl about it, and one of the reasons I think that you get that is because there's no guitars on it. You know, Replica's got guitars, Telecon's got guitars. He's always said, "Oh, you wish you stuck guitars on Pleasure Principle." But the point is, the reason it sounds so unusual and so good is because there's no guitars on it, because he had to use the synths to get that guitar power, because there's sounds on Pleasure Principle which sound like guitars, but you know they're not. But he's
there's one moment he plays the guitar just very quickly.
Yeah.
On track.
But it's to me that's the perfect one. And then Telecon, you know what's really weird now? I do think it's a good record, but I think it's too long. I think it's missing a hit single. Well, it is because there's nothing, you know. And I remember when I bought it, I found it a bit grueling to listen to because it starts so slowly and then it ends so slowly. And I gotta be honest, I've never really had a lot of time for the Joy Circuit. I know a lot of Numan fans love it and all that, but chuck that off. I Die, You Die should have been on it. I mean, you didn't have to put both singles on it, but I think it needed that one single, because I wasn't a dedicated Numan fan at the time. You can't be at 14. And I wanted a hit single on. I remember waiting, thinking, I Die, You Die is going to be on it. I Die, and it weren't. So I had to buy I Die, You Die separately when the album came out.
I think that was the plan.
Yeah.
But I'm sort of in agreement with you. I mean, Replicas, it's very guitar-y in a lot of places. Which I weren't quite expecting, but I enjoy it. Pleasure Principle, love every single track. Telecon, there was probably 2 tracks I never liked, which was This Wreckage and Telecon.
Okay.
So I've gone from the point of loving every track on one album to the next album. There was 2. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're brilliant tracks and I listen to them now, but at the time they didn't really do it for me.
Yeah. I mean, it was a lot. It was a lot to take in, because actually, even with just 10 tracks on, I don't know if you noticed, it's actually quite a long album. And I know that because I tried recording the blooming thing onto a C. It's one side of a C90 and it didn't fit on. And in the end, what I ended up doing was, I remember doing a C60 and putting the album on, and then taking the 2 singles and putting their B-sides on. And then you've got your album then.
You got the American version.
Okay. The CD version now. And you know, but saying that, Dave, you when did you see Numan for the first time?
Ipswich, 79.
Okay, so you've been there right the way through, because I mean, what I think is always quite an amazing thing about Gary Numan's career trajectory was that he achieved 2 #1 singles effectively without any touring. You know, he wasn't a live act. It wasn't even like there was a buzz about him.
No.
It's literally landed from outer space, and I think that's probably what people needed at the time.
I agree.
You know, but I didn't see him until 81. For the the farewell shows at Wembley. But I remember with the Living Ornaments albums. The 79 and 81. So I bought that before I went to the Wembley gig. And although the 79 set is pretty good, you can actually hear the improvement in the band and the confidence in the 1980 set, Living Ornaments 80. It's a much more accomplished and better delivered live set, I think. Didn't you get involved in the reissue of the CD reissue of the Living Ornaments 80? Yeah. I think that might have been the first time I saw your name.
But to be honest, I actually prefer 79 because to me it's opposite to what you're saying. It's a little bit raw, but it's still brilliant.
Do you think it's also because that was your first tour?
No, maybe, but I noticed on the telly tour, Numan started to have a little bit more of a stranger voice, so you couldn't quite always understand what he was singing about.
Do you mean when he goes from the snarl to the slur?
Yeah, and you didn't get that on Tour in Principle.
Yeah,
you got it on the telly tour, which is fine. You know, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's brilliant. But I noticed this. Like with the Engineers album, which is the Sydney show, by then he was almost starting to sing slightly different.
Yeah,
but it's fine because he was more confidence, you know, and things like that. So it's good.
No, I mean, I think we'll go on to that singing bit, because I think he did change his vocal style, and I don't think it was for the better. Well, it was something what Nash the Slash was going to said to you, which was, I think he got a bit fed up with the snarling sci-fi thing, and he wanted to be Japan.
Yeah.
And so he's slurring like David Sylvian.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like he's not having a Coke, he's having a vodka and Coke or something. It becomes a little bit...
You are talking about the drink, aren't you?
Yeah. But it becomes, that's just the way I see it. During the telly tour, that was fine. You know, it worked. Dance, I think, is a fantastic album.
Okay.
But at the time, when I originally heard it, I thought, right, he's made his money, he's got his stardom, so he's just doing something different, what he fancies doing. It's not for me or you or anyone, it's just something he fancies doing. But over the time, when I look back at it now, it's absolutely blinding, brilliant album. You know, I wasn't taken by it straight away. You know, but your views on that?
I remember obviously excitingly buying it the day it came out. I bought She's Got Claws, and I was quite excited the fact that it was the first, UK Gary Numan 12-inch.
Yeah. Yeah.
and then playing it and thinking,
Yeah.
right. I
didn't
mean,
sign
let's start
up
with
to-
let's start with she's got claws. You know what? I still don't particularly. I wasn't that into it at Wembley. I was sort of thinking, all right, bit different. It's a bit funkier and it's got sax in. And then when I actually got the single, I sort of, oh, it goes on a bit, doesn't really do a lot. And then you flip it over the blooming B-side. I sing Rain's bloody awful. And
But at least there's no saxophones on it.
yeah, and then Exhibition is odd.
Good, it's good.
You know, it's not a favourite track of mine, but it's certainly not rubbish. It's halfway between the Telecon and dance thing. And then when I bought the album, of course I thought, well, 11 songs on it. No, 10 songs on it. Yeah, okay, normal album. And it seemed to go on and on and on.
It does.
And then again, when I tried taping it, I realised it was an hour long.
Yeah.
And I think one of the other problems with it was because it was quite slow and they were pressing all that music onto a standard vinyl. The sound quality was really bad on it.
Yeah.
So a lot of it didn't come across. I mean, in retrospect, when they put it out on CD, not the first or second time, but I think it was the third time they put it out on CD, and they really sorted the sound out.
Yeah.
So that's when it was the single CD with the revised packaging, not the double pack. And
I don't
the
know.
extra
There's so many
tracks on.
versions of it.
It was the version where they actually stuck the dance title track on the Vaults.
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah.
They improved it a lot, but you know, at the time I'd started listening to Japan, and I know that he'd got into Japan, but I don't think any of it is as good as what Japan were doing. I mean, I don't know if you were into Japan or not.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, I went to see Japan in '81. When did Life in Tokyo come out?
That was '79 that came out. But Quite Love got reissued. Quite Love got reissued in '81, and then Team Drum came out.
That must have been when I went back '81. I saw them. I personally, they're two completely different bands, or groups, or singers, or whatever. I think when I listen to something like dance, I love the fretless bass and all that sort of stuff, and it's great because Mick Carn's playing on it, you know, or Pino or whoever. No, it was next one.
It's all Mick, that one, yeah.
But I think I was saying this the other night to someone that when I went to see Gary at the Berserker tour, which I think was about '83, '84, I can't remember exactly. I remember standing there thinking, play it like you used to. You know, I don't want to particularly hear a 9-minute of Cars with a bass thing going on, or a fretless bass. I mean, and the sim sound had changed. You know, I know Chris once said to me about, you know, Moog's always playing up and breaking down, and he loved it when he got his whatever it was, and he could play without having to worry about it. But the Moog sound was completely different, wasn't it? It was a sound of its own. You know, and and I often think, when Gary thinks, where do things go wrong? And I'm sure a million people have told him, a million people got their own opinion. But as a fan from '79, stand there in '83, thinking, play it like you used to. It was going wrong then, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, you know, when I think back to dance, I mean, a lot's made of the Mick Carn thing, but he's only on 5 tracks. I mean, now that we've actually looked back, and I'm actually friends with Rob Dean now, who played on the album from Japan, and he's told me a bit of the back, you know, some of the background of what was going on and stuff like that. And there were a lot of other tracks that didn't make it onto dance, which we've since found out. So there's Bridge
Yeah.
is a Mick Carn one, and Rob's on it. He's doing the all that stuff. That track's rubbish. Then there's the early version of We Take Mystery to Bed. Now I've never been sure, but I can almost tell from listening to it. That's Mick Karn on sax and bass on the early version of We Take Mystery to Bed, which is the 12-inch B side of
It's on something.
of We Take Mysteries is the early version there. And then there's there's all these other tracks. So so the concept was actually going to be much bigger.
Mm.
But I think it was too long an album. I don't think he pulled it off, apart from A Subway Called You, I think is really good.
Oh yeah.
But even then, although that's more or less a Japan track in all but name, I don't think it's as good as, say, Swing by Japan, for example.
Oh no, I agree.
And then if you look at some of the slower stuff, I don't think any of it is as good as Despair by Japan, if you want to do comparisons. And then if you compare it to, say, Brian Eno, because I know a lot of the critics were saying Dance sounded like the stuff on Another Green World. Now, I've gone backwards and I started listening a lot more to Brian Eno in the late 90s, early 21st century. And it's not as good as the stuff on that. So what it's trying to emulate, I don't think it's as good. And then quite recently, there was do you know a band called, or a duo called Reed and Caroline?
No.
They're an American duo, a male-female, and they're friends of Vince Clarke. They supported Erasure. But on the last album, there was a track called Entropy.
Right.
And what it does, it's a total tribute to the material on Dance. So it's slow. Right. It's got the sort of the slow drum machine beat. And then it's that electric piano sound that Gary liked, using the CP30 thing. And although it's a girl singing, the way she's singing it like she was a female Gary Numan. And it's superb. I mean, I played it to Chris, and Chris loved it. He said, "Blooming heck, that's done really well." And I just think the album wasn't. I remember just being disappointed with it. I mean, I like A Subway Called You. I like Crash, but I think it could have been done better. But I find it quite difficult to actually say I think this stuff's really good.
It's a strange album, because it's not an album you'd listen to in your car. I mean, I do generally really love Dance nowadays, more than I did at the time. Yeah. And I did put it in my car, but the tracks are too slow to listen to in your car. Yeah. If that makes sense,
I mean, I would have preferred. I mean, when you think of what was going on, so he just retired from. Sorry, did you really think he was going to retire?
No.
Okay, I did.
No, I think Gary, unfortunately, well, I don't know. I mean, yeah. I think he had come to. He was bigger than what he thought he was, or he wasn't as big as what he thought he was. He was big, but a lot of people, or some fans, people I knew at the time, had already started to drop out a little bit. And I just think he thought, right, I'm going to retire. This is going to be great. Everyone's going to be sad and all this. And I mean, even he's admitted, he knew that was the wrong decision. I mean, and it's okay to sort of say, well, I was sick of touring and doing this. No one made him tour. Yeah. He toured himself. I mean, he'd done the tour in principle, finished in May, and the tele tour was back in September. He didn't have to do it straight away. No one told him to. Yeah. So when you're sort of complaining, oh, this touring too much and all that, you did it. No one told you to do it. Take a break. Just take a break. I mean, he retired in 81, and 9 months later was on tour in America.
Yeah. Can you imagine him if he'd have toured the Dance album though?
Yes.
That's a surreal thought. But you see, I think when Music for Comedians came out, and especially the 12-inch version, I just thought, wow, he's back.
Yeah.
That was what I wanted him to do. That's because that's got the fretless bass, it's got your Linn drum in there. It's that long sort of thing. It's got atmospheric bits. That was to me the perfect single. And that, if something like that had been on Dance, and Dance had been short, say Dance had been an 8-track album, and say he'd lifted the best stuff off that and I Assassin, I stuck it on one album. So I'd stick This Is My House and Wars. Is it War Songs or War Games? I can't remember which one it is. It's War Songs. War Games is the B-side, isn't it? Yeah. I'd have stuck with, War Songs on it, so I'd have taken those 3 from My Assassin and I'd have put some of the things that were going on, Face to Face. There you go. That's another one that Mick Kahn played on that, got left off.
Yeah.
That I think should have gone on the album. So that, they could have been a really good 8-track album that would have kept up some momentum. But you see, I remember after Music for Chameleons thinking, this next album, My Assassin's going to be great. And you know what?
It started off well.
It started off when then, we take Mystery to Bed. I know a lot of Numan fans like it, and I know it's a favourite Numan disc. It's all right. It's not best. It's him trying to do European Sun by Japan. Yeah. But it's okay. But I've never got on with White Boys and Heroes. It's not rubbish, but it's just there.
It's just there.
It's just there, isn't it?
Yeah. And
when you think I was into Japan and Dream of Siam, I didn't think that was that good. I thought that sort of differed a bit. There were some good bits on it, and that sort of differed. I don't think the edit of Music for Chameleons that they did for the album, it just sounds like a mess there.
Yeah.
1930s Russ, interesting direction. Didn't like it, but it was different.
It makes no sense. It's not a Numan track, is it?
Yeah. My Assassin, the track.
I mean, if you signed up to Numan in '79 and thought he's going to be, there's someone going to be with a mouth thing. On it.
Harmonica.
Yeah. I mean, if you'd have bought replicas and that was on there, you wouldn't have bothered buying another one.
Yeah.
It's similar. So then moving on a few years, we then had Sharpened.
Yeah.
So what did you make of that?
Loved it.
Yeah.
Loved it to bits. Yeah, because after I call it the Warriors debacle, I hated it. I hated everything about it, It wasn't like because it was saxophone, it was jazz saxophone.
Yeah.
Dick Morrissey is a good player. I ain't got a problem with that.
No.
But do you want a jazz saxophone solo in the middle, free forming? And no, you don't want that.
Isn't it amazing? John Webb could play it note for note every single night.
Oh, he was amazing, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Note for note every single.
Yeah, he was just like Dick Morrissey after just 2 months tuition.
Perfect every single night.
Yeah, but no, that actually Warriors was when I bowed out. I mean, I didn't go on the tour. I mean, Chris has told me how brilliant the tour was, but did you go on that tour?
Which one?
Warriors tour.
No, I didn't.
Okay, because I've heard a lot of. I remember hearing a Radio 1 broadcast of it, and I was just thinking, what's this? All this bloody slap bass on it for, and all that. And that's why I find that Mighty Boosh thing about slap bass and Ivan the Bear being a Gary Numan fan and all that kind of stuff really funny, because there's all the slap. But I was like, what all this bloody slap bass for on metal? I'm like, fuck off.
Well,
and it was on Remind Me to Smile as well. I was like, and I was glad I didn't go.
No, I didn't go.
And I bought the Berserker. I mean, I thought Berserker, the actual track, and I thought the single version of My Dying Machine was fantastic. I thought Cold Warning was fantastic. But again, it's a couple of songs, and then I came back for the Fury show, for the Fury tour, which I absolutely loved. And I think the Fury album, there's some good stuff on it. And I think if you take the best stuff of Berserker and the Fury and all that PPG stuff, put the best 9 on, you'd have had a really good album then.
Yeah.
But that's when Change Your Mind came out, and I just thought, this is it. This is brilliant, because it was a pop song, but it was quite fresh musically, because if you listen to it, it's actually quite jazz funky because of Bill Sharp.
Yeah.
But because he does it himself, he is a jazz funk musician. That's why it works.
Well,
Gary's not a jazz funk musician.
If you watch the interview I done with Bill Sharp, the track was completely finished. But Bill had been trying to sing on it.
Yeah.
Which he realised he can't sing.
Yeah.
Or maybe he can sing, but that wasn't working. And I think,
No.
if I remember correctly, he was saying somebody they were at Gary's studio or down that way, and Gary was there, and someone just asked him, "Would you come and sing on this?"
Yeah.
And once Gary put his vocals on it, it made the song completely.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah.
I mean, it was no big surprise that was his biggest hit for a couple of years. And I'll tell you a funny story with that one. I mean, I loved it so much. I started DJing about a couple of months after Change Your Mind came out, I think, at college. So I was doing discos. They used to call them discos.
Yeah.
And I had this thing of, you know, I played the sort of music I liked, and it would be called weirdly an 80s disco now. But of course, it was the 80s. So, you know, but I remember a couple of years later, I decided to drop. That's the term, isn't it? That's what DJs say. They drop. I dropped Change Your Mind into this student disco, and the floor filled.
Yeah.
And no one really knew that they got off on the funky synth and the beats. And the fact that Gary was singing on it was almost irrelevant because it was just a great track. You know, there were people dancing. And I remember after it finished, I put another song on. Someone came up to me who did know a bit of Gary Numan, just said to me, just looked at me, goes, "Bloody hell, I'm impressed you managed to get people to dance to that." You know. And so when I heard he was going to do an album, I was sort of great, but it took a little while. But I think in that period, that late 80s Gary Numan period, he did some of his best stuff with Bill Sharp. So I've always loved No More Lies. I think that's fantastic.
Oh, brilliant track.
I think Voices is probably actually the best. He's up there with Change Your Mind.
That would be my favourite one.
Yeah. I'm on Automatics. You know, great. I mean, a New Thing from London Town I Don't weren't on it. Should have been on the Numan now. It's a shame it got wasted on Strange Charm, really. And I mean, Strange Charm was, oh dear, that was when it was starting to go really badly wrong. But I mean, I bowed out more or less of the Numan thing by that time. But I remember going out to buy the Sharpened Numan album and not being able to find it anywhere, and I had to make a special trip to London to get it.
Because you did drop out for a while. So when did you sort of revisit Numan?
Oh, blimey. 1993, because he was opening for OMD. I mean, the weird thing for me is and this is actually one of the reasons why I think I'd done the Electricity Club, which was the site that did all sorts of synth music rather than a fan site for a band. Even back in the day, I never really dedicated myself to a band. I always seemed to have about 8 or 9 on the go, and I bought records of everybody, but I never did with Numan. I just bought an album and a single, and if there were extra tracks on the 12-inch, I'd buy the 12-inch, but I wouldn't buy the 7 and the 12-inch and the Japanese edition and all that kind of stuff. But if there was a band I was more into than anyone else, was probably OMD. That's probably the only time I've done the sort of fan thing where you do more than one show on a tour. You see, even when Numan only did one show on a tour, I never did. What's the most you've ever done on a Numan tour?
One.
Oh, okay, all right.
I've never been. I never felt the need to go another.
Yeah. You see, I've never quite got that, but I realised with the OMD thing, so this would have been the Andy McCluskey solo OMD when he came back. I mean, at that point, I admit I really did miss OMD at that point. I wasn't missing Numan so much, but and I remember, I was seeing this girl that was, part of the OMD thing. And we were going to do 3 shows on the OMD tour, the Half-Field Arena shows in December 1993. And Numan was supporting. Yeah. And I remember, oh, great, let's make sure we get there early and be at the front. But of course, all the Numan fans were at the front before us, And I remember thinking, I wonder what he's like now. And he comes on with his leather jacket and he's doing all of this. But I thought the set was really good because it was a mixture of new and old stuff.
Indeed.
And I seem to remember, but obviously I wasn't in on it, but I remember the last time I saw Numan before that was the 87 exhibition tour show.
Right.
And I remember thinking there's not enough old stuff in this for a greatest hits tour, which is what I thought the exhibition tour would be. It weren't. I felt there was too much Strange Charm, Berserker and Fury on it, and not necessarily playing the best tracks.
No.
Which is actually, it seems to be a thing with Gary. He'll play songs from good albums, but he'll play the worst tracks from them. Anyway, that's more on that later if there's time. But
yeah.
But no, I remember enjoying the mix of new and old stuff. So I absolutely loved the fact that he was playing It Must Have Been Years and Me and Disconnect From You and We Are Glass. And Remind Me to Smile, I think, crept in on the OMD support set.
Yeah.
And actually, you know, and there was acceptable, you know, new stuff. I mean, he started off with the Song Machine and so, which actually I think is all right. You know, it's you know, it's a good opener. You know, if you're going to open a show, it's, you know, quite lively and all that. And so, you know, so I ended up seeing Gary 3 times because of this OMD thing. And then I thought, yeah, I'll start seeing him again. I remember seeing a show on the Sacrifice tour and not being quite so into it.
The Sacrifice, be fair, I went to see him at Colchester at Sacrifice. And I believe Colchester, of all places, some sports pavilion. Oh, I think I was lucky if there was 50 people there. And I mean, lucky if there was even that.
Well, I saw him at the Astoria 2, and that's tiny. And there was a bit of a mess up with my friends and all that. We ended up being stuck in the bar and watching it through a glass plate, through glass. So it was a really weird gig, and I can't remember. I think I appreciate now where he was heading with Sacrifice.
Yeah. Well, it was a good album, actually. After Machine and Soul, to actually, and not even Machine and Soul, the 2 albums before.
Yeah.
As a Numan fan, you were buying it, listening to it, but you were listening to it, actually trying to make in your own mind a song sound good, because there was nothing good on any of them. Well, there was the ballads or slow songs were really good.
Yeah.
But the rest, no. I mean, I know Gary says in his book and everything about, you know, Machine and Soul, but it's a man clutching at some kind of career, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a bloke wearing ill-fitting clothes that don't suit him. You know, I mean, I think I only really liked one track from that period, that Machine and Soul period, which was a B-side, In a Glass House, which I thought was really good. Yeah. And I could appreciate, you know, we go back to say the Metal Rhythm period. I mean, I like New Anger in that sort of, oh yeah, you're trying to do Addicted to Love by Robert Palmer. I get what you're doing there, but is it him? I mean, you know, I was well out of it by that point, but you know, going to the Sacrifice, it weren't rubbish, but I wasn't sure I was that into it. And then somehow, I think around the time of I think the 4th reissue of Blooming Cars, you know, when it was the premiere remix by that point. And there was a tour going supporting that, and I just thought, oh great, he might do that greatest hits set now because it's promoting the premiere hits greatest hits album. And of course, half the bloody set's unheard stuff from Exile. And I'm like thinking, oh God, and that's when I stopped for a while.
Exile, I like Sacrifice. Obviously, he's redoing it, or has redone it. I prefer just to have left it alone, but re-engineered it so it was better quality. Because I've got this horrible feeling when we do get this new Sacrifice, it would be this whining sort of ghosty voice coming on. But that's, you know. Same with Excel. I really enjoyed some good tracks on it. I mean, I liked all that sort of stuff. There was tracks I was starting to like, where over the last few albums, I wasn't particularly liking any of them.
Mm.
But you know, I mean, let's move forward to like Numan today. And as I say to people, I'm not quite so much into it now because Gary's gone one way. Maybe I've just stood there all going the other way. It doesn't mean to say it's no good, but it's not what I particularly like a great deal. I mean, I know you said to me to listen to Savage, and there was only really one track, which I forgot now.
Is it a slow one?
No. I really love it. I can't remember what it's called. It'll come to me in a minute.
Yeah.
But it's still Mercy.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd sort of. I dipped back in around 2002, not to actually see him live, but I remember, I think it was because when the Exposure Great Hits came and there was a signing. And that's when I first met Gary. And I actually had my suit on, which weirdly looks like the Pleasure Principle suit. So there's actually this photo. It's actually hanging up on a frame behind me, actually.
Yeah.
So there's me dressed in a sort of Pleasure Principle suit, looking like his bloody accountant. he's in his sort of like, sort of goth uncle sort of thing. And it's quite a really bizarre photo, but I love it, because I do look a little bit keen. I look a little bit excited to meet him. And I remember sort of thinking, I think I bought Pure, but I wasn't too into the sort of the 9 Inch Nails type thing, but I did think Listen to Your Voice was brilliant just as a track. And I remember Prayer for the Unborn thinking, this could be done a little bit better. There's potential in this. And then, of course, there was that Andy Gray remix that was on Exposure, which is brilliant.
Absolutely brilliant.
And that, to me, was like, that's what he should be doing, this halfway between this dark, gothy thing with a few electronic blips and things. And I did ask Gary, in one of the interviews, I did ask him about that. And Gary's always said that at that time, that's somewhere he could have gone, but he decided not to. Instead, he went the bloody Jagged, which is horrible. It's horrible, that album. It just is. It's horrible.
It was quite fun because I spoke to Gary after a gig and we were talking about Jagged, and he was telling me that because it had been bootlegged and everyone had it before it was even released, and he was furious, and he was saying, like, this cost me £15,000 to make, and if I don't tour, I wouldn't make any money, and this was bootlegged. And I was thinking, well, I wouldn't have bought it anyway.
Yeah. It's the only Gary Numan album I don't have a copy of. Actually.
I probably got it, but whether I played it or not, I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm not even convinced I've got it. Amanda tends to buy me these things, and they're still in the shrink rack.
Yeah,
in the Numan drawer.
I mean, I remember in all the lead up after Jagged, and then there was the talk of, the follow-up album. Yeah, it's going to be called Splinter. It's going to be the heaviest thing I've ever done. And it's all going to be all the same tempo and the same. And I thought, oh God, this sounds absolutely shit, this idea. And of course he ran into trouble, which is then why that, Dead Sun Rising came out. And that was, I guess that was part of the revival. I mean, I was amazed that they actually managed to get him on breakfast telly to promote The Fall as a single. And they actually played 30 seconds of the video on breakfast telly. My mum actually recorded it for me. I was at work. She actually recorded it for me. Said, "Oh, Gary Numan's on breakfast telly."
I think me and Aid Orange will be talking about that single.
Okay, all right. And that's when I started, that's when then I got invited to, that's when the first email interview happened. And then I got invited, to watch one of the shows and to meet him and all that kind of stuff. But and then when Splinter was going to come out, I just sort of thought, I'm not sure about this. And I had this really weird situation. I was then sent an email by his then publicist, who literally, it was an order. It was like, you will interview Gary Numan on this date at this time. I was like, what? I was being told. I didn't ask. I was just told, you are interviewing Gary Numan at this time. Can you do it? And I thought, yeah, right. Here's the album. And I thought, oh God, I've got to listen to this bloody album and talk to Gary about it. And then when I played Splint, I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, oh, this is a lot better than I thought it would be. And oh, some of it's even quite soulful.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it's even quite the ballady stuff I thought was really good, you know. And so I then had the interview, and I just had an absolutely brilliant time with Gary. I mean, I was given half hour, and Gary didn't stop talking. It was brilliant, 45 minutes. And I remember I don't know if that coloured my view of things, but I remember when I got invited to the Splinter show, I just thought it was one of the best Numan gigs I'd seen for ages. He'd finally got the balance right.
Yeah.
And then with Savage, I sort of thinking, now he won't top it. This will be it now. And then there was a Quietus podcast. Quietus are this sort of hipster blog, and they actually had Gary on, and they played a track from Savage, and it was and it all began with you. And I've got to be honest, that was the first Numan track that had stopped me in my tracks since the Telecon days, where I was like, yeah, I was just like, wow.
People have told me that, but I still haven't listened to it. So
yeah, it was just sort of, there was enough elements of it to remind you of old Numan, but it was new Numan. And it was that balance that I mentioned, that in a way, Andy Gray's remix of Prayer for the Unborn's about. And then I remember when I heard the album, I mean, When It All Falls Apart is basically more or less could be an old Gary Numan track, but it is done in a sort of modern Numan, so I think that's great. And I thought at the 10 tracks that were on the standard album, I thought 7 of the tracks were absolutely brilliant. There were 3 tracks I weren't keen on. And unfortunately, when I went to see him in Cologne on the Savage tour, those are the 3 flipping tracks he played. and he didn't play the ones I was really into. And actually, that was the first time my ears ever hurt at a gig, and I actually had to wear earplugs in the end, and it spoilt it.
Yeah.
And that's where I am today with Numan.
Good. Gee, we've been talking for over an hour.
Really? Oh dear.
I found on my YouTube thing, people tend to watch 18 minutes.
Okay.
so there's not much point going on much longer.
Okay.
But as always, it's brilliant to talk to you. And, you know, we've been mates now for 11 years.
8 years.
8 years, sorry.
Yeah.
8 years. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
You know what's really funny about us two, you know, bonding over Numan and all that? We've never actually stood next to each other at a Numan gig ever.
No.
We've been at the same Numan gig, but that was not by accident. I was meant to meet you, but you got delayed. And we sort of said hello in the pub, and we went to the gig separately. But we've never actually stood next to each other at a Numan gig.
I know. Well, as and when times open up.
We stood next to each other at other gigs. That's what's quite odd. I mean, we've actually done, you know, we've done other stuff, but not Numan, which is quite funny.
I know Chris Payne sent me a message saying you really got to meet a good friend of mine, Chi. Yeah. And so I sent a picture of me and you. When we done Tech 004. Yeah. Yours, I think Lyndon took it, did he, in black and white, and you're just standing there, and I'm behind you giving it something. And I said, "Oh, you mean this one?" And he's like, "Oh yeah." But that's brilliant. But gee, thanks. Brilliant.
Stay safe, mate. Seriously, you know, with everything going, it's been like, you know, I sometimes feel we're living it's like the song "Me." Yeah, on the Pleasure Principle. That's what it feels like sometimes.
Well, you know, this is why I started doing this video thing. You know, I'm not Michael Parkinson. I'm not a video. I'm no interviewer. You know, that's why I call it the Numan Arms. You know, because I'll be having a drink. Other people will have a drink. To me, it's meant to be 2 people sitting in a pub having a chat. You know, as we would, and we'd sit there all night. I mean, I used to find this going to Numan gigs, it was almost a drag to actually go to the gig because we were all enjoying ourselves in the pub. You know, you know,
Depeche Mode gigs are a bit like that.
No, man has told me I'm not to mention the Depeche Mode.
Oh, okay.
Because we'll be on here for another hour.
Yeah.
But, no, it's brilliant, and you know, this is what this is all about, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know?
No, it's good what you're doing, and I've enjoyed quite a few of yours. Thank you for having me.
No, it's no problem, mate. Well, no problem whatsoever.